Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Good Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. As you can see this evening, once again we're back in my tasting room, and what delights have I got for you this evening? Well, firstly, obviously, I'd like to say a big thank you to those very, very nice people at Diageo for sending me a load of samples recently, so I thought, well, let's do an episode of the show on them. And what we have here is 4 distilleries from their portfolio, which are bottled under what they call their Flaura and Fauna label. There's quite a few of them, but obviously I've just got these 4 here with me this evening. What I will do is obviously I'll introduce each one of them as we're going along and then taste them and what have you. But they're, well, I suppose, I mean, what we've got 10-year-old Glenlossie, 12-year-old Mannochmore, the 12-year-old Blair Athol, and the 16-year-old Mortlach. Probably not the most well-known of distilleries, possibly why they're bottled in the Flora and Fauna range rather than anything else. But anyway, shall we start with the Glenlossie then?
Shadows come from the shadows of the dream world.
Right, okay, so like I was saying, start with the Glenlossie. As I've got quite a few, as I've got 4 distilleries here, I should be looking at the book and giving you a bit of blurb. Right, well, Glenlossie is obviously a Speyside distillery, and it was founded in 1876. In actual fact, it's right next door to Mortlach, and going back sort of some time when both distilleries were only in sort of part-time production, the staff from Glenlossie would go over and work at Mannochmore for a while and so on and so forth. But nowadays, both of these 2 distilleries are now sort of in full-time production. The interesting thing about Glenlossie is that it has a rather large dark grains plant. Now, what's a dark grains plant? You probably wonder. Basically, they process the leftover pot ale from the first distillation, you know, all the sort of spent barley and all that kind of stuff from the wort, is processed in a dark grains plant and turned into to animal feed. So, like with a lot of things in the whisky industry, there tends to be quite a bit of recycling, and you know, not an awful lot tends to go to waste. And because, as we know, the pot ale is quite high in proteins and what have you, so you know, it makes a pretty good animal feed. So, but anyway, enough about the distillery itself. Let's get on and you know, taste the whiskey.
Come with her, dance in the moonlight.
Right, okay. So Glenlossie, yeah, it's a spey. I mean, I've tasted a few bottlings of Glenlossie, and it can have a sort of a nice kind of typical sort of grassy spey kind of character. Mainly, you know, I've come across it in independent bottlings. So it'd be interesting to see what the distillery bottling comes out like. So. It's a little bit oily. I think, and certainly sort of judging from, well, I don't know. It's probably bourbon, but there might be a little bit of sherry in there. I don't know, but it has a sort of a richness and maybe a sort of a very slight kind of sherry note to it. It's a touch of burnt caramel. It's not quite as sort of grassy and fresh as some bottlings I've tasted. feels like it's a little bit dampened by the oak, but you know, it's pleasant. It's, I don't know, it's a bit earthy maybe, but yeah, it's not going to sort of set the world on fire. It has to be said. Right, okay, onto the ballot then. It's a bit of apricot. It's a little bit vapid. Sort of flavours tend to sort of dissipate fairly quickly. Certainly feels like, again, there might be a bit of sherry cask in this, a little bit of dried fruit, but it all kind of clamps down on it. I mean, the spirit is just sort of like, you know, all hemmed in by this oak. It's a bit short. It's a bit, dare I say it, sort of nondescript. I would imagine, although I don't know, and it certainly doesn't say in the book, whether the bulk of this production goes to blending, but it's certainly it certainly tastes like a blend component, shall we say, you know, it's okay. Certainly sort of nothing wrong with it. There's no sort of off notes or anything like that, but it is a bit bland, shall we say. I know sort of probably the guys at Diageo won't like to hear me saying that, but you know, it's okay, you know.
Come and fly down with the angels, rise again now like a phoenix.
Right, okay, shall we move on to the Mannochmore 12-year-old. Again, it looks like it's pretty much been aged in bourbon casks. Like I was saying, Mannochmore is the sister distillery to Glenlossie. It itself was sort of founded in 1971. Quite a big distillery. Sort of churns out sort of nearly 3.5 million litres of alcohol a year. Now, I do know that its main claim to fame, should we say, or Mannochmore's main claim to fame was the Lockdhu black whisky of the late 80s, and which was, although I've not tasted it, was to all intents and purposes pretty heavily caramelised and quite nasty. I have tasted the bottling that's similar to it, called Q-Dub or Black Dog, which is made by the Speyside distillery, which in essence, from what I remember them saying, is essentially their version thereof, and it's pretty rough old stuff, it has to be said. I mean, really caramelised, and you know, why in God's name anyone would actually want to drink that, I have absolutely no idea. But anyway, that's beside the point. Yeah, I've tasted a few Mannochmores over the years, and it can be quite nice. Can be quite sort of like, again, quite sort of spey-like in character, sort of quite citrusy and grassy. Can get a bit sort of honeyed and rich with a bit of age to it. So. So let's see what the nose is going to give us then, shall we? Yeah, yep, it's fresher. It's certainly got more spey character. I think I'm right in saying this has been aged entirely in American oak. A little bit of sort of fruit, little bit of perfumed fruit edge, I guess. Yeah, it's getting quite aromatic now. Once you give it a bit of air, it's pleasant enough. Nothing sort of, you know, really sort of jumping out of the glass at you, but you know, a little bit of caramel now possibly. a little bit of vanilla, toffee, but yeah, it's okay. Right, should we see what the plan's like then, shall we? Again, it's a little bit on the short side. Bit of herbalness, bit of apricot, bit of fruit. Again, it's simple, it's straightforward. Again, it sort of really tastes a bit like another blend component. A little bit of honey possibly, but again, it's a bit on the short side, and it's a bit sort of, yeah. Well, I wouldn't say it. Again, I mean, the quality is absolutely nothing wrong with it at all, but it's just sort of, you know, there are more interesting Speyside whiskies out and about there. So I mean, although it's, you know, it's not a bad whiskey. Again, it's sort of like the Glenlossie. It's not going to set the world on fire. It has to be said. So. Right, okay, let's move on to the first of the two rather obviously sherried drams. Right, okay, so Blair Athol, quite an old distillery, founded in 1798 in the Eastern Highlands. Not a huge distillery, output somewhere in the region of 2.5 million litres per year. Now, the bulk of the production, obviously, of Blair Athol goes into bells, and it's having to, when you taste bells, it's fairly obvious that the Blair Athol is the major malt component, so, you know, for people that like bells, Blair Athol is a fairly sort of safe bet to go for if you're going to buy them a whiskey. So it's now, I mean, you know that sort of, you know, sherry cask whiskies are not my favoured whiskey. It has to be said. I mean, they do tend to be all about sort of the cask, and you don't tend to get a sort of a great deal of distillery character. So, you know, we'll see what the nose is like then, shall we?
She's a witch, Siren and the vampire.
Yeah. First off, very, very clean sherry. No off notes, no sulphur. Yeah. For obviously being aged in, I would guess, first fill or Rosso, it's relatively supple. It's got a sort of a nice, pleasant, nutty character to it. A little bit of licorice, plenty of spice. I mean, for a sherry cask whiskey, it is really pleasant, really enjoyable. Like I said, I mean, there's no real distillery character there whatsoever, but yeah, it's got a pleasant complexity. I mean, of all the sort of the sherry monsters, I quite like Blair Athol. Yeah, again, it's sort of, you know, not a majorly well-known distillery, but yeah, it's pleasant. Okay, out of time. That's nice. Very soft, good length, lots of nutty, toasty, lightly sort of toasted dried fruits, bit of walnut, raisin, that kind of thing. it's subtle, it's very soft, it's not a sort of a huge leafy Oloroso, astringent type of whiskey. It's, I mean, that possibly maybe to its bottling ABV, which I think is 43%. It's all quite harmonious in actual fact. I think it's all quite nicely balanced. Again, like on the nose, there's not exactly, well, there isn't any distillery character whatsoever. It's all about the casks it's been aged in. But no, I think as sherry whiskies go, it's pretty pleasant actually. It's got like I say, it's got a nice lightness of touch and a really nice kind of nuttiness. So yeah, not too bad at all, I think. Right, okay, on to the Mortlach. As you see, yet another sherry cask whiskey. The distillery itself was founded in 1823. 3.8 million litres of alcohol is its output. Right, okay, so Mortlach. I'm always a bit wary of sherry cask Mortlach because if you go back probably about 10 years now, there was a number of certainly independent bottlings of Mortlach that came onto the market that were distilled in the sort of mid to late 80s, and there was a lot of sulphur sherry casks going around. I don't know what their wood policy was like at the time, but obviously it wasn't that good. So it just seemed to me that every time you came across a sherry cask Mortlach that, like I said, had been distilled in the mid to late 80s, it just reeked of sulphur, you know, not good at all, you know. So, like I said, I'm always a little bit wary of Mortlach, certainly sherry cask Mortlach. I mean, I can't believe that sort of Diageo would bottle a sort of a sulphurous sherry mess, but we shall obviously find out then, shan't we? Thankfully, no sulphur. Actually, it's again for a sherry cask whiskey, it's got a lovely nose. It's got a sort of light sort of citrus note that sort of cuts through it. Again, quite subtle. Lots of sort of prunes, walnuts, dense, slightly malty fruit, certainly dried. A little bit of crystallized orange, maybe. A touch of smoke. Yeah, it's actually quite a complex nose. Albeit, again, the complexity is all derived from the sherry cask. I mean, I have tasted a number of Mortlachs been aged in bourbon cask, and they can be quite fruity and you know, quite elegant in actual fact. So none of that on display in this particular nose, but you know, again, it's a sherry cask, so what do you expect? But it's quite a sort of a perfumed sort of sherry cask, so it's actually you know, I think as sherry whiskies go, this is actually quite pleasant. You know, like the Blair Athol. About time then. Again, soft, mouth-filling, slightly creamy, quite a lot of dried sort of spicy fruit. Again, there's that sort of citrus kind of note, certainly on the finish, which gives it a bit of a lift and it stops it becoming all too cloyingly sweet. Yeah, a bit of crystallised fruit on the aftertaste. again, you know, it's a pleasant sherried whiskey. Yeah, I could certainly drink that. I mean, you know, I do occasionally like the odd dram of something sherry. Certainly tend to work sort of well after a meal. Yeah, when you could sort of drink cognac or an armagnac. But I think for sort of everyday drinking, it's you know, it's not a style I would opt to go for, should we say? But I think sort of, you know, as a you know, taking it as it is, shall we say? You know, not a bad whiskey at all. You know, really quite enjoyable in actual fact. Right, okay. Should we sum these up then? Right, okay. Glenlossie, 10-year-old. Well, it's blending fodder, really, isn't it? Has to be said. It's okay. It's a little bit sort of. It's a filler, really. You can see why this would get used in blends. I mean, it's okay, but you know, it's never going to sort of set the world on fire. It tastes okay. It's nothing wrong with it, but like I said, I mean, it's just blending fodder. Mannochmore, I think personally slightly more enjoyable, less sort of dampened by the oak, a little bit more of that sort of space-eyed character. Again, a bit short. You know, I have tasted more interesting bottlings of Mannochmore. Again, I think, you know, it's a blend component really at the end of the day. So you know, there you have it. You know, neither of these two obviously we stock. On the other hand, obviously the Blair Athol and the Mortlach we do stock. They're available on our website, www.gauntleys.com. If you want to read my tasting notes on these and the other bottlings that I've tasted, then obviously take a look at my WordPress blog. Blair Athol, yeah, I like the Blair Athol as a sherry cask whiskey. Again, you know, no real sort of, you know, distillery character, but you know, good clean sherry, not too OTT, nice softness to it. You know, all round quite pleasant. And the Mortlach, well, yeah, probably my favourite of the three, not because it's the oldest, but you know, it just seems to have a little bit more to it. It has that sort of, you know, lovely sort of, you know, citrus character, which kind of lifts it and stops it becoming sort of too much of a sort of an OTT short sherry monster. So, you know, there you go. It's one of those tastings where, you know, where I'd usually be favouring the American oak-aged whiskies over the sherry ones. It turns out completely the other way around, and as they say, that's the wonderful thing with whiskey. So anyway, I think that's just about enough summing up. Hopefully the big wigs at Diageo won't be too upset with my appraisal of some of their malts. You know, 50% success. Well, you know, that's not too bad, I guess. So anyway, all that's left to say is, you know, good evening and good dramming.
Fly down with the angels, rise again now like the phoenix. Know the love that lives forever in the heart that never dies, never dies. I'll never live.
Again, as you can see from the colour of it, another sherry monster. Mortlach itself, founded in 1823, has a capacity of about 3,000, all that's left to say is, bugger, I think it's stopped again. Oh, fuck's sake.